as they begin to fall, I still get you through the drive. If I leave and I don't come home, would you be warm tonight? Welcome to Flights of Fancy.
I'm Dan Norbury,
Walter Bowne.
and today we're going to be discussing Christmas Carol and drink this lovely flight of beer that's been in front of me for about a half an hour while you've potted around the studio here.
And of course, we're joined by the great Kevin Goldhahn up there in Astoria, New York, with his 2020 single, May the Day Shine, A Million Sweethearts. His former band was The Gantry. Check him out. Amazing stuff.
You want to talk about the beer first?
Yeah, this is from Yards, called Long Jawns. If you're not from the Philly area, Jawn means what? I'm kind of hip. I should know this. Like, what's the genre? Like, what's the thing? They play on it, like Long Johns. This is Long Jawns.
Winter lager.
6% alcohol by volume.
Nice heavy winter beer. Man, you go from the summer IPAs to the winter beers like that. It's nice, thick and dark. It's a nice ruby color to it.
Rarely have a bad beer from Yards.
So, Christmas Carol, Dickens. Most people are familiar with this work from one medium or another. It's been made into like over 200 different instances exist in our pop culture.
Many.
Films, audio dramas, stage plays, operas, 3 different ballets, Wonderful Life, Family Man.
The Grinch.
It's a ghost story, which of course I love.
And the Victorians loved their ghost
Oh
stories.
yeah, that was a big thing.
He had 5 very popular books. Barnaby Rudge, he had Oliver Twist, he had Nicholas Nickleby, and then he was writing this concurrently with Martin Chuzzlewit, which I've read all of Dickens. 2 years ago, I just said, okay, I'm going to read all of Dickens, and I did.
I did not.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I just wanted to, and then I read 2 biographies on Dickens. I just wanted to do a deep dive, but I was shocked by how much I really, really liked Christmas Carol and how funny it was.
Yes, it is. He does inject quite a lot of humor. He does his classic Dickens, like social commentary pieces in it as well.
He put his money where his mouth is because he was a huge supporter of public works, including, and he did this all in the DL. He ran a house, hired someone for prostitutes to be reformed and to move out into the colonies, raise families, and it was quite successful.
Probably his most famous work, I would say. And so he sits down to craft his version of Born to Run. He crafts
It's interesting. Yeah.
Christmas Carol. And he calls it a Christmas Carol because in his mind, it's like that type of tradition where you're going to sing it around the fire. Right. In his mind, people are going to tell this story over and over again around the fire for years to come, just as carols do.
Right.
And he goes as far as to name his chapters
Staves, which has 2 meanings. The first meaning is like in construction.
Yep.
Like a pillar or like a piece of wood. And then another is like a stanza or
in a Christmas
carol. But I like what he says. It's a carol in prose.
Yes.
So it's almost like what we sing, but it's in prose. As soon as this novel, it sold 6,000 copies in like 3 days.
Well,
sold out.
Before we go there,
and then it goes almost immediately to the stage.
When he goes to produce it, he demands that it be produced as a book, as a collector's item with gilded gold letters on the front and illustrations inside. Okay. He demands of these.
And that's a problem because the production costs so much. He made like 197 pounds.
Right. Which this was the work that was supposed to save him. And once he was done, though, he was like, this work deserves more than this.
Yeah. And then there was pirated versions that were coming out.
Yep.
And then the American, it sold 2 million copies in America, but he was always at war with American publishers because he couldn't establish the copyright. So he came over in American Notes, another book, but Henry James had the same problem. And like Henry James' big hit was Daisy Miller, but he made so little money on it, but it catapulted him into the national stage.
Right, which this absolutely had a similar effect. So each one of these staves will have a unique theme that we'll look at it, use unique symbolism within that theme. It's a short work, 125 pages.
Right, but
in this edition, this is very small, probably about 4 by 7.
An average reader could read it in 2 hours. I read it and listened to a Tim Curry version on Audible. Fantastic version. Thackeray, who wrote Vanity Fair, he called Christmas Carol a national benefit.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then he says Scrooge became more famous than Dickens himself.
It is a character. It's in the vernacular. People say, "Oh, he's such a Scrooge."
Or
It's
humbug.
actually become its
Yeah.
word,
Yeah.
humbug.
Yeah, he's the epitome of the miser.
Our story starts with Scrooge in his counting house.
Yep.
And ends with
Counting
him
out
pretty
his
much
money.
in his dressing gown or his long johns.
Yeah. With one piece of coal.
Right?
And he has the rest of the coal in a lockbox.
Right. Meeting his first ghost. And that's one of those trivia questions I get you with all the time. How many ghosts did Scrooge meet? He met 4.
4.
Because he met Jacob Marley, his old partner, and then he meets each one of the ghosts of the Christmas.
But before we go to Marley, he
the whole structure?
the structure. What I love about this is one of the best openings. Dickens is known for his openings. Like, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. But, Marley was dead to begin with. It's just
perfect
boom.
beginning.
And then
Perfect beginning.
there is no
especially
doubt.
for a ghost story.
There is no doubt about it. Or is there a doubt about it? Because he comes back. And then this was what's funny. Old Barley was as dead as a doornail. Now, most writers say don't use a cliche, right? And we have this intrusive narrator who we're never really introduced to. Perhaps it could be Dickens, but it doesn't. But he says this: "Mind, I don't mean to say that I know, on my own knowledge, that there's any particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade, but the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile." I love that line. "And my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it."
Right?
or the country's done for. I love that. It's so funny.
And that's not even his funniest lines.
No,
he gives Scrooge
so
some great funny lines too.
I've underlined all of them.
Yeah,
it's
great.
It's like, you're gonna have 3 ghosts. Can they just call it one time?
Yeah. Can we just? It'd be better for me if
Can we just say
let's
just not do this?
Yeah, it's great.
And even when he's mean in the Larry David type of meanness.
Right.
That's
yeah,
so
when the guys
specific.
come for the money, he's like, "What? There's no almhouses? There's
But
no things for the poor anymore?
No,
really? Did they all go away? Oh, thank God, because that's where my money goes. Now get out of here."
Yeah.
So let's talk about the beginning in terms of
with Bob Cratchit.
Well, yeah. So really, what you see in most of the Scrooge adaptations, whether it's the George C. Scott version, Muppet version, etc., is this beginning plays pretty close to Dickens' original writing. You have Scrooge in his counting house. You have Bob Cratchit in the outer room, freezing cold because he's only allowed one piece of coal in the brazier to keep him warm.
Right, and his clothes are threadbare.
Scrooge is like, "I suppose you want the whole day tomorrow."
Yeah.
For those of you who've never read Dickens' work, which really everybody should read this. It's not a long read.
If you're going to read one Dickens, this is what you read.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's so well written. If you've only seen Dickens or Christmas Carol on screen,
or
even on stage, but if you've ever seen any of those adaptations, most likely you've seen these opening scenes because it doesn't change that much.
But what you don't get is this: there is no doubt that Marley was dead. Okay. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I'm going to relate. If it were not perfectly convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began, there would be nothing more remarkable. But you're not going to get that intrusive narrator bringing in an allusion to Hamlet and the father, and about to astonish his son's weak mind, because Hamlet has a weak mind. And it's just that stuff that you're missing. Saying like foul weather didn't know how to have him.
And this whole opening session establishes what I consider the 4 biggest motifs within the entire work. Each one's going to have a little bit of its own theme and a little bit of its own symbolism, but throughout they have a common theme and symbolism. This is what I wrote down. The use of light to symbolize awareness, especially the awareness of oneself. Darkness to portray ignorance.
Because he says he liked the darkness. Darkness was cheap.
Right? Warmth because of charity and love.
Yep.
And coldness, want, neediness, and an absence of compassion. So we're talking in this opening scene, we see all those things come into play.
Yep.
And he gets visited by a couple visitors during this period.
Yep.
His nephew,
who
is
awesome.
A wonderful character, who's very outgoing, energetic, very friendly, and very determined to always show up once a year to his uncle and try to spread Christmas love.
Right, and he doesn't give up on him.
Nope, doesn't at all.
I love that idea that you just don't give up hope because you just never know. He was as solitary as an oyster.
And that goes back to that coldness again.
But this is how awful he is. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming, they would tug their owners into doorways and up the courts, and then would wag their tails as though they said, "No eye at all is better than an evil eye. dark master.
All those themes laid right out here in the beginning.
And then
Right.
Once Upon a Time. When we get Once Upon a Time, and then the allusion to Hamlet's ghost and stuff, oh, he's dead, but then wait a second, maybe he's not
Maybe
really
he's
dead.
not really dead, but he has to be dead for
But
the
he has
story
to be
work.
dead.
Yeah, and then they build that up slowly, right? And not that slowly, because chapters are only a few pages, right? You get to him coming home and the haunted knocker, which again is one of those
So
things
good.
that's in every version that I've ever seen of it, right?
It's so important because he sees the face.
Right, he sees the face of his old partner, Marley, in the knocker and pauses for a second.
And then he thinks it might be his digestion, which
Yes.
is hilarious.
I love that line too. We'll get to that in a
Good,
second.
but let me go back to the nephew first.
Sure. Oh,
Because-
nephew, way back in the counting house. Okay.
And he says he gives a Christmas. He gives a great reason why Christmas is awesome.
Yes.
I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he even gets the Clark Cratchit to give an applause, and he says, it's on in this book, page 20, when it comes around, part of veneration, the sacred name, the origin, and Dickens is credited. Prince Albert was credited with the Christmas tree, but critics have said it was Dickens that really established Christmas and all of what we see it as Christmas today.
Yeah, he is known as the savior of Christmas, or the inventor of Christmas.
And then he says, "Oh, I loved your speech. You should go into Parliament." Because Scrooge is no dum-dum.
So he's in there, and Marley appears.
Yeah.
Now, what I love about Marley, and adaptations of this ghost differ, he is this ghost of a man who is trapped by chains. Each link he forged during life through not necessarily bad deeds, but through lack of empathy, chasing money instead of happiness.
Right.
And all these chains, he described as like, these chains are like tentacles that are floating all around him with cash boxes clung to them, and they make all this racket whenever he walks and whenever he moves. And he's actually trapped by the life he led as a human being.
Right.
And he appears to Scrooge, "I've been around you every day," I said in that counting house, "and you've never seen me. I don't know why you can see me today."
Yeah. And then Scrooge was like, "Well, that's not too comforting."
Yeah, right.
There's so much understatement.
Right? He's like, "But you're going to be visited by these three
But this is what I love. He says, listen, you were a great businessman. And then business, cried the ghost, wringing his hands again. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business." It's awesome.
That is great. And that's beautiful. And that's the main theme right there, is that, you can be a successful businessman, but that's not the end. That's the means to an end.
Then Scrooge says, "Don't be flowery, Jacob." He says, "I have sat invisible beside you many, many a day." And then the understatement, "It was not an agreeable idea."
Yeah, you're going to be visited by three ghosts. I'd rather not.
I'd rather not. Can we just do this?
I also like the whole line about there's more to the gravy than the grave.
Oh, God,
that's
so
a great
good.
line.
The pun.
Scrooge refuses, even though when he first sees the door knocker, they describe him going around every room of his house,
Looking under his bed,
making sure there's no ghosts. Then finally sits down to eat his little bit of gruel because he's got a little bit of a head cold. And when Marley appears, he insists that it's his digestion.
Yeah,
I could swallow this toothpick and see a million goblins haunt me for the rest of my life because of this.
Of my indigestion.
And Marley's like, "Well, you know what? You're going to see. You're going to be visited by these ghosts."
Yeah.
And a departure from most of the films is you're going to be visited. They all won't come one a night. They're going to come. One's going to come tonight. One's going to come tomorrow night. One's going to come the day after that. The day after that.
And then time we're in like another time zone because he's like, wait a second. There's no, he's hearing the clock tick, tick, tick. And the whole onomatopoeia thing.
And you also have to realize that Christmas was a celebration of days at this point, not just one day. So that trips people up as well.
And what's interesting about Dickens is that he was so big into the holiday that he was an actor himself. So he would act on stage. He loved going all around the world. His big American tour was a big success. And Twain did the same kind of thing, giving dramatic readings to his work. And they said he was just an amazing actor. He would do these 12th night parties where his whole family would be involved, and he would be the director.
All throughout this whole part where he's even when he's walking home, it's dark, it's foggy, it's darkness.
Oh, the fog is it's the fog is
impenetrable. You can't even, you could reach out his window and touch the building next door, but you could not see the light behind your window because that's how thick the fog is.
Yeah.
The whole house is dark because, as Walt said earlier, he likes the dark
Right.
because
And
it's
they
cheap.
say he's going up his staircase, which is Marley's house,
Right.
and it says you can get a hearse up there.
Yes.
So there's like this like foreshadowing.
Just
and the
talking
width
about
of that.
right. And that's all about that symbolism of dark and light again. He crowded around the little bit of light in the room around the fire. Marley comes in and just takes over the entire space.
Yeah.
And then Marley, and this is never in any of the movies you see, Marley flies out the window, and as he does, Scrooge can see all these other men of commerce.
Oh my God.
They're ghosts.
Yeah.
Floating, and some he recognizes, floating out amongst the households of
The
London.
1%ers, let's say.
Yeah. Who
But
are suffering the same fate as his former partner.
This is what I love too, is that the fireplace, you don't get this in the movie, but the fireplace was old, but it has portraits of the scriptures.
I love that
Cain
too.
and
I
Abel,
almost forgot
Pharaoh's
about that.
daughters, queens of Sheba, angelic messengers, Abraham, the apostles. So
within the tiles, a Dutch tile maker came in, and within the fireplaces gilded all these stories from biblical times, from the Bible, all throughout, and of course they're all lost on somebody like both of them.
And he says humbug. He says humbug.
Yeah.
But then at the end, he tries to say humbug, but he can't. He's like his typical like old sport thing, like his little civility. He can't say humbug. I have to look up, was humbug created by him?
I don't know.
Or was humbug always?
I know it's associated. I don't know.
I gotta look up that.
Look
Maybe
that up
I have to look it up on my. All right, so we ready for the third segment?
We are. See you soon.